Hello and welcome to Nitty Gritty. I'm your host, Stephanie Bush, and today with me is Scott Winans from the Colorado Plateau Mountain Bike Trail Association. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful. We're very glad to have you. So first question I have for you is, what got you motivated to get involved with this association?
Colorado Plateau Mountain Bike Trail Association has been around for about 30 years, and I'm a longtime mountain biker. I moved to the region in the early 90s and started building trail not with COPMOBA, which led years later to some of those informal trails becoming formally adopted by BLM. And COPMOBA is really the group that does the trail work responsibly. So that's what pulled me into working with COPMOBA and volunteering a number of years ago.
Great. So what is your specific role in this association? You said it was
COPMOBA. It's kind of a mouthful.
Okay. I'll say that instead of the long name. So
yeah.
In COPMOBA, what do you do? What are usually your parts of the projects?
I'm the president of the organization. So we're all volunteer. We have one part-time paid staff person who coordinates our various chapters. We have 5 chapters. I serve as the president of the board of directors. We're a volunteer board. We have, I think, 12 or 13 board members. And I'm also very active in our local chapter here in the Grand Valley. So our 5 chapters are spread between Grand Valley and further south. We have a chapter in Delta, Montrose, Ridgeway, and one in the towns of Nucla and Natarita in the west end of Montrose County. I help organize what we do on a broad scale. So that's a lot of outreach organizationally, and I work very closely with Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service. All of our trails are on public land, all but a very, very tiny amount. And I help our chapters coordinate and get trail built and get maintenance done. And locally in our chapter, I'm involved primarily with the Palisade Plunge project for the last few years. That's sort of been my main focus. But our organization has a lot of people pitching in a lot of different ways, so there's a lot of organizing that takes place.
Wonderful. So I heard you say Palisade Plunge, and I know that's something huge for you and for the Grand Valley in general. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. The Plunge is a 34-mile trail that's going to connect the top of the Grand Mesa to the valley floor, finishing in the middle of town of Palisade. So 34 miles, 32 of that is going to be a brand new single track, high quality mountain bike trail. And 2 of it the last final 2 miles or just under 2 miles will be a paved path finish from the end of the dirt trail into downtown Palisade. So the idea is to connect the top elevations of the Grand Mesa with the valley. It's a bi-directional trail, although most users are likely going to shuttle to the top and ride down. That's kind of a little higher fun factor for most riders. But the route is also open from the bottom up. And it's open to hikers, bikers, and equestrian users on the upper elevations.
Great, that is so exciting. I can't wait to get out on that myself.
Me too.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
After all the work totally pays off.
Yeah.
So how did something of this magnitude come to life, I guess, from the beginning of the project to now?
It has been a long-running project. It's interesting, as I started looking back at some of the documentation from earlier planning efforts going back into the 1970s. So I guess to step back, first of all, this project, the trail, resides partly on U.S. Forest Service land and partly on Bureau of Land Management land. These are public land agencies. And it also crosses land owned by City of Grand Junction, Town of Palisade. It also crosses 2 municipal water districts or watersheds. So there are a lot of players in the project. So organizationally, it's been a very involved, very large-scale project in terms of what COPMOBA typically does. So we had a lot of players, a lot of partners, and really the partnership is the critical aspect. You don't get any project done without good partnership locally, and you don't get a big project like this accomplished without a lot of partners and some very committed partners. So the early planning for this, when you look into it, you realize that folks have thought of connecting the top of the mesa with the valley via a trail for decades. You can look back through various documents and see that the planning is fairly similar because there are very few places you can actually make that connection. The planning was pretty similar 30 years ago and 20 years ago. Those projects just never got off the ground. We got a lot of community involvement for the Palisade Plunge project over the last several years, and that's what has allowed us to get the project from a neat idea to actually being able to implement this, build a trail, get it on the ground so people can use it.
Absolutely. So sounds like there's just so much communication from people that really, really want to see this blossom, essentially.
Yeah, we've had a tremendous amount from very early stages. Once we started talking about and sharing the concept of the trail, the feedback has been nearly nothing but positive. And the nearly is not that there's been a lot of negative feedback, but there have been a lot of things to coordinate. You know, we're touching a lot of pieces of property, we're dealing with a lot of agencies, a few private property owners that are nearby, just to make sure that everybody's taken care of appropriately as a big project like this gets implemented. You know, there's a lot of discussion. But the user group, the hiking community, the running community, the biking community, and even folks who are not necessarily very active trail users, see the benefit of a trail like this from an economic impact and just a life quality of life impact for the community. So the outpouring of support for the project has been substantial and very consistent for the several years that we've been working on it.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you have all that support. So you touched on just how it will be so big for the community, but especially the mountain biking community. Can you kind of explain how big it will be and I guess how this trail will compare to maybe other trails in Colorado?
Yeah, you bet. So COPMOBA is a mountain bike trail organization, Colorado Plateau Mountain Bike Trail Association. We work on primarily single track trails for non-motorized use, but those trails are also used by the hiking, walking, running community, you know, as well. So this trail is going to be one of a very few trails of its type worldwide, literally. There are not many individual trails that are this length that have such a great elevation relief to work with. That's really one of the key drivers. A lot of mountain bikers love to have downhill trails. You know, it's fun, it's great, and there are riding challenges associated with downhill riding. You can also ride up the trail, you know, and the access and connectivity is really important. But for the mountain bike community, we happen to have a couple of trails like these in the Utah-Colorado area. The Plunge is going to sit among a very small group of trails like this. But one neat asset of the Plunge is not only do we take advantage of existing infrastructure like Highway 65, the scenic byway that takes people up to the top of the mesa, and quick access off of Interstate 70 to be able to do that. But the trail also ends right next to the town of Palisade, where you have other recreation and visitor activities that are exciting for not only your bike user or your trail user, but the families that will come visit, you know, to access the trail as well. And the Plunge will serve as a kind of an iconic route that we can talk about for the area. But folks who may come to ride the Plunge trail will also spend a day or two riding the rest of our great trail resources in the area. So they may spend a day in Fruita at the North Fruita Desert or 18 Road Trails, or out at the Cocopelli Trails in Loma, or the Tabawash Trail Network, or the Lunch Loops Trail in downtown Grand Junction. Those families will also hit a number of our wineries in Palisade.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we have a lot of great facilities that are family-oriented activity, agritourism in Palisade area, the vineyards, orchards, and a lot of places to recreate after the fact. You know, folks get done having a 30-mile ride, and they oftentimes want to sit back and relax and have a nice evening.
Yeah.
You know, places to stay.
No, totally. Just an all-around, it's just going to be huge. I'm so excited for that, for you and everyone else, definitely. Well, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you so much for all your great information. And thank you all for tuning in. And thank you, Matthew, again. I'm your host, Stephanie Bush, and we will see you on the next episode of Nitty Gritty.